El Nino is back. It's now official, and this time it could be more powerful and destructive than ever before. Today, we're taking a very close look at what's coming our way. Welcome, everyone. A few weeks ago, we analyzed the situation, explained the phenomenon, and said it was quite possible that it was coming, and now it's here. Officially confirmed by NOAA, the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, one of the world's most renowned weather agencies, El Nino is not a storm, not a volcanic eruption, not a single extreme event. It's a climate phenomenon that, once set in motion, can shake up the planet's entire weather system for months on end. Professor of Meteorology Andreas Fink explained to me exactly what happens during this process.
Well, first of all, it's a change in the water temperatures in the tropical Pacific Ocean. It is absolutely huge, stretching from east to west, more than 10,000 kilometers. And normally the warm water is located in the west of this tropical ocean, so near Australia, near Indonesia. And cold water, quite cold water off the coast of South America, specifically the countries of Ecuador and Peru. And linked to this particular pattern of sea surface temperatures, there is also a wind system involved. The winds in that area generally blow from the east, starting near South America and moving westward, heading toward Australia and Indonesia, and they push the surface waters along the way. This warm water bubble constantly towards that continent. And sometimes these winds are stronger than the cold water, we call it upwelling off South America, is more intense. So this water is even colder than usual. And this warm water area is then pushed even harder towards Australia and is also a bit warmer. That is La Nina. We also call it the cold sister of El Nino. El Nino, of course, means the Christ child. And when an El Nino event occurs, this system flips in terms of wind, but the water temperatures also change. You can perhaps imagine it simply like this warm water bubble, which is actually a dome. The sea surface is a bit higher there, sloshes towards South America because the easterly winds weaken, so the wind pressure drops. And so we suddenly have off the South American coast, instead of 23 degrees water temperature, 30 degrees. That's a huge difference. The Galapagos Islands right on the equator are also affected because we know that above 26.5 degrees, there's the potential to create very high-reaching tropical thunderstorms. Before that, the water is too cold, and then it gets warm enough. And so the thunderstorms that are normally located in the west can suddenly start off South America and bring flooding there as well.
By the way, if you enjoy these kinds of expert interviews, why not subscribe to the channel right now? It's worth it because I have some very interesting conversations planned here on the channel in the coming weeks, and if you subscribe, you'll always get a notification. If you've already subscribed, giving a thumbs up really helps the video. 5,000 likes should be enough to appease the YouTube algorithm. Thanks, guys. In its latest report, NOAA has taken a clear stance. According to the report, sea surface temperatures in the central and eastern tropical Pacific are significantly above the long-term average. The so-called Nino 3 to 4 index, the key metric researchers use to classify El Nino, currently stands at plus 0.7 degrees, with the easternmost region even reaching plus 2.1 degrees. El Nino occurs when the trade winds at the equator weaken or even reverse direction. Normally, these winds push warm surface water from South America toward Australia and Indonesia. Without this driving force, the warm water accumulates off the South American coast. The ocean warms up, the atmosphere reacts, and suddenly the effects are felt in areas thousands of kilometers away. And now comes what personally strikes me as truly awe-inspiring. The forecast that the NOAA has also published. The agency states that El Nino is expected to continue intensifying through the winter of 2026 to 2027, and that there is a high probability it will become a historically strong event. Researchers even suggest that this event could be among the strongest El Niños since records began in 1950. The 1997 El Nino is considered one of the most devastating climate events in recent history. Heat waves, flooding, massive droughts across several continents, wildfires, and billions in damages. The El Nino of 2023 and 2024 was not quite as extreme. But as one of the 5 strongest since 1950, it helped make 2024 the hottest year since the start of industrialization. If a moderate El Nino can already cause that, what does a very strong one do? So the term Super El Nino is haunting the media, and not entirely without reason. Professor Fink explains how this term should be categorized. All the media are running headlines about a super El Nino. I don't know, I've read headlines that almost make you feel afraid, sort of. What is that supposed to be? I realize it's not a scientific term. Is it even a valid term? What is super El Nino supposed to mean?
Yes, exactly. Well, to be honest, there was actually a single scientific publication a few years ago in which American authors used this term super El Nino, so to speak, or rather published it. But we in the scientific community don't use it. Instead, we speak of a strong or very strong El Nino, and we measure that based on the anomalies, so to speak, the deviation of water temperatures in the Central Pacific. Yes, we have a large region there, and if the water temperatures there deviate from the norm by more than 2 degrees, then we have a strong El Nino. And then 2.5 degrees, the very strong one, that varies a bit depending on the center. But that's the idea in principle. In fact, our forecasting models, and there are various approaches, now predict when looking at all forecasts an at least strong but not very strong El Nino with a probability of more than 50%. That means you actually have to prepare for the fact that this El Nino could turn out to be strong. Maybe we can also discuss in a moment that there are major uncertainties there, but that's where the word super or mega El Nino going through the media comes from.
It's particularly interesting how the NOAA arrives at its assessment. The agency uses the so-called North American Multi-Model Ensemble, or NMME, a combination of different climate models that are evaluated together. The advantage? No single model decides alone, but the consensus from many calculations provides the overall picture. And this consensus clearly points in one direction. Absolutely crazy how precise this specific system has become by now. We can say months in advance what's brewing in the Pacific, while at the same time we can hardly predict if it'll rain in Wanne-Eickel next Sunday. Pretty crazy. But now for the most important question, what exactly does a strong El Nino do to the planet? The impacts vary greatly from region to region. In South America, particularly on the west coast, severe flooding is a threat due to the accumulation of warm water. Australia and parts of Southeast Asia, on the other hand, must brace for extreme droughts, as must the Amazon, the heart of our planet's tropical rainforest. For Europe, the situation is somewhat more nuanced. The German Weather Service remains cautious. European weather is primarily dominated by other patterns. The North Atlantic Oscillation, upper-level jet streams, and El Nino are merely individual cogs in a much larger system. Lothar Bach expressly warns against equating seasonal climate forecasts with traditional weather forecasts. He says it is not currently possible to make reliable predictions about a hot summer. At the same time, he emphasizes that the global impacts can still be enormous and thus indirectly affect Europe as well. El Nino influences global ocean currents, which act as a kind of air conditioning system for the Earth. If they become out of sync, then precipitation patterns, temperatures, and vegetation zones also become out of sync. And globally, of course, we notice this everywhere, whether through food prices, natural disasters in other countries with which we trade, or rising global temperatures.
But I'd still like to be more specific about that. There are studies in the press that say, yes, we find a weak but statistically significant correlation to slightly milder winters, which, by the way, have become more likely in Europe anyway due to climate change and to more precipitation in spring in the Western Mediterranean and Morocco. But to be honest, it's really such a small, as we say, explanation of variance that one shouldn't go out and say that these effects will definitely happen. That's why most experts, and I include myself in that, of course, say, no, we can't say anything about that right now, which doesn't rule out that such a causal chain might occur in an individual event. But I wouldn't count on anything at the moment.
Yes, regardless of the specific consequences in Europe, we could see global extreme temperature values in 2026 and 27 due to El Nino if the NOAA forecast proves true. The NOAA itself justifies its high assessment with two specific factors: the unusually high oceanic heat content in the Pacific, meaning heat stored in the water that fuels the intensification of the phenomenon, as well as expanding westerly wind anomalies that further strengthen the pattern. I find it absolutely fascinating that temperatures in the Pacific can be measured so precisely at all and at such an impressive depth. How does that work? Does someone dive down there with a thermometer?
That was quite a while ago. After a, let's say, quite devastating El Nino in 1982-83 in terms of its effects, the American Ocean Agency at the time it's still the same one now. But back then, they decided we're going to build a measurement network of buoys in the Pacific, which still exists today and will hopefully survive the current conditions in America. You know what I'm referring to. And on these buoys, which are anchored, for example, every 10 degrees of longitude and then every 2.5 degrees north and south of the equator, they have long anchors, and there are also lines hanging from them. And on these lines are sensors that measure temperature and salinity, among other things, and currents at various depths. Yes. And this data actually allows us to see the signal and also to feed it into our models, so to speak. That's incredibly important. You're absolutely right, because we can't measure from a satellite at that depth. We can't see into it. It's actually these anchored buoys. This measurement network is called Triton, if you want to look it up, which helps us to detect an El Nino early in the ocean.
So what's the bottom line? El Nino isn't apocalyptic news, but rather a natural phenomenon that humanity has been observing, understanding, and increasingly modeling more accurately for a long time. But if it does turn out to be a very strong El Nino, then we'll still have to prepare for quite a few changes globally. I'll keep you updated on further developments, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. And now we're moving on to a topic that could change the Earth at least as much as El Nino. The Earth is currently doing things we haven't seen before. In recent months, volcanic eruptions have been occurring worldwide with such frequency that scientists are taking notice. What's happening to our planet right now? That's exactly what we'll be looking at in the next video. Just click on the video displayed in the top right corner. It's gotten very, very exciting. As always, you'll find another topic related to science and space in the bottom right corner. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.